The Empire strikes back, and by the Empire, I mean Wink Martindale. Wink Martindale was on fire today when we had him in the press conference. It felt like he was pushing back on all the narratives. Not like it felt like he was. He was fed up with it. Whether it was defensive, even offensive, there was a lot that Wink Martindale had to say. So we are going to get into what he had to say about both sides of the ball on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And Wink Martindale really pushed back on a lot of the narratives that have existed. So mea culpa right away here. It's because this is what happens when you don't do your own research. I felt like he watched or listened to this podcast, and he was speaking very directly to me, not just because I asked the question, but I was parroting some of the stats that Joel Klatt and a bunch of other people were putting out there about the pressure rate, the blitz rate, and all of that. And he's like, I don't know where y'all came up with that from, but it's not right. It's flat out wrong. But nonetheless, I asked him, you're going to hear my question and everything. I asked him about what he's kind of learned about the state of the defense and all of that, going into coming out of the first 4 weeks of the season. Whoop, see, it's taken a minute here for me to move it. But let's hear what Wink Martindale had to say.
You've now had 4 games of being back in college. You've gone against some pretty good offensive minds and Sark and Lincoln Riley. Has anything kind of surprised you, taken you aback? And obviously you kind of also changed the way that you defended the pass this week compared to week 2.
Well, I think every game's different, we've already talked about the strength of schedule that we had to start off with, and everybody's fitting into their own role, and you saw some players really excel in the last game. And, I kind of enjoy listening to everybody's comments on how many times you pressure and everything else, because a lot of them are wrong. But, I think that we played really well in situational football against SC. You saw it at the end of the half, and you saw it at the end of the game. But people don't understand that there's actual calls that you call in those situations, so you can get a sack before halftime, or you can stop the passing game going right down the field on you when you're in there in the fourth quarter. So, I've been doing this for 40 years, and yeah, Sark's a good offensive coordinator, and he's got a really good quarterback, and yeah, Lincoln Riley has another good quarterback. I mean, that's just the challenges of college football, and it's the challenges of pro football, period. So I think that we've adapted and played what we thought was best to win the game, because at the end of the week, we just want to be 1-0, just like this week. We just want to be 1-0. We're not going to get too high. We're not going to get too low, because it's a constant grind for the season, and it's a constant climb. So yesterday we had a really good practice, and I think it was better than last week's Tuesday practice, and that's our goal. Today we need to have another better practice. Just keep stacking them. And, I'm really excited where we're at and where we're going.
All right, that felt a lot more fire and brimstone in the moment. I can say that much. But later he was a little bit more fiery about this, especially the offense. And he flat out came out at one point and said, wherever people are getting this blitz rate stuff, it's just flat out wrong, he said. And that I think is illuminating, because he also explained why. It's like, we're still sending 4. It's just we might be dropping the end into coverage and bringing pressure from somewhere else. It's still 4-man rush. It just depends on where it's coming from. People just see the rusher and they assume blitz, all of that kind of stuff. So, I'll give him credit for that. But he also mentioned here in what we just listened to that he did adapt. The players did adapt, right? It's not like they were without adaptation. That did, in fact, happen. So it's just it still kudos for an old dog learning new tricks, or an old dog remembering the tricks they already knew, essentially. Because they got, no matter how you want to look at it, they got by Texas. And against USC, they didn't. They found ways to make pressure happen. Now, it wasn't like they weren't generating pressure against Texas. It was just ineffectual for the most part. that's what you kind of got to remember, is that this was a game against the Longhorns where there were a lot of times where Quinn Ewers was able to sidestep pressure. He just kind of didn't care it was coming, got the ball out, and just kind of whatever it was. Miller Moss, different scenario entirely, because he was, he was on his back a lot, especially early. He was throwing at guys' feet, anticipating pressure that was maybe coming, maybe not coming. Josiah Stewart was absolutely cooking Elijah Page. So there's all of that. And I think that, it all obviously worked out well for Michigan because they found ways to get home, right? They didn't find ways to get home against a superior offensive line. Now, when it comes to the latter part of the season, it will be crucial to find similar ability against Oregon, which I think is probably likely. They haven't exactly lit things up offensive line-wise. Ohio State, it looks better, but it's been playing against, a couple MAC teams, against Marshall. That's not exactly a good way to really tell whether or not Ohio State has improved, right? Players are allowed to improve. So as much as we can sit there and say, like, well, they were this last year, they might be better, and they might be worse. And we'll know a lot more only really when the game comes, because the schedules are different, the teams are different, and you'll know how much more they'll be able to handle things. But defensively, this was a step in the right direction. I think the next step is making sure that we can see that the run defense is still very solid against a Minnesota team that ran all over Michigan last year. I mean, it didn't score a lot of points, but it did manage to do a lot. Now, it was an injured Mason Graham. Last year, he was in the game, but he missed the Nebraska game, and he came back and all of that stuff. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how Wink Martindale attacks what will likely be a very heavy run attack by Minnesota. At least that will be the plan, is for them to try to get after it up in the middle. A lot of the same kind of delayed handoffs and counters and things of that nature that Texas ran that kind of gave Michigan fits. That's what gave Michigan fits last year against Minnesota. It was kind of surprising when you were watching that game to see, like, okay, are they able to do all these things? But I asked Wink about Jayshawn Barham, and because he was actually very enthusiastic about him. I know we all like to say, okay, he's not in the right place at the right time. He's overrunning a lot of stuff like that, and that's all true. But I wanted to kind of, just without getting any kind of the bias from me, right? Like, what do you think? You tell me what you think about what you've seen. And the biggest takeaway he had, he said, like, he's going to continue to get better and learn the system and all of this stuff. You have to keep in mind, it is 4 games in a new system for him. He wasn't around for the last regime. He was at Maryland, where they didn't play defense. Defense was optional. So, but he said, the thing I like about Jayshawn Barham is the same thing I like about Max Bredesen. He's a tone setter. When he when he hits, it's one of those things that the opponent is going to remember that forever. They're never going to forget the moment that they hit Jayshawn Barham. And he's a tone setter. And he says, we're here. Announces, like, okay, this is what kind of game it's going to be. And there is a place for that. You just got to, improve and kind of play within the confines of the defense. And I think he'll probably get there. But if not, Jimmy Rolder's right there for him. And they have a lot of other options that they can go to. Let's talk about the offense. There's lots to get to offensively. So we will get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, we got a couple things that we have to talk about. One of them is my Roy Player of the Week. Obviously, that's going to go to Kalel Mullings, who absolutely had a breakout performance, a career best, put the team on his back. But it's kind of hard to put it just on him because there were a lot of players that played really well this week. Jair Hill had his best game. Obviously, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. But I'm going to give it to Kalel Mullings. Now, Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code Locked On, and you'll be automatically entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary. This week, we selected Kalel Mullings, like I said, because of all of the things that he was able to do, the 63-yard run and the ensuing touchdown being chief among them. So I am giving Kalel Mullings $100 on Roy. If you were as impressed as we were with his performance on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in $10, it adds up fast for Kalel. Now, you have the chance to show your appreciation for Khalil and his standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to bring to your program. So get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. All right, we're going to continue on here in just a moment. But before we do, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I forgot how to be able to speak today. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make your job faster and easier. They've even created a new feature that helps you write job descriptions. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. To post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I swear, when I am like with it or not with it in life, I'm like completely fine, like speaking and don't mess up my words and all that kind of stuff. It's almost like because I have to focus so much. But when I'm like, I'm wide awake, I feel great. Can't speak, not good at it. Let's hear a little bit about what Wink Martindale has to say about the state of the offense. He was asked, like, do you have any faith that the offense can figure some things out here? Because clearly a lot of people don't, a lot of media included. I mean, I'm skeptical. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it could happen. But Wink had this to say about it all. Let's hear.
There we go again with that narrative, though. You know what I mean? It's like, do you realize what happened this past weekend in the NFL? The Baltimore Ravens ran the ball 45 times. I think they threw it 12. And they beat the Cowboys pretty bad, right? Until the end of the game, right? But that's just the way the league is. The Saints, Derek Carr threw for 12 passes in his first game, I think, and 16 in the second. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure, but I know it was a low amount of passes. They were 2-0, right? Look what Washington just did to Cincinnati. So the pendulum's swinging, either way you want to look at it. And I think that with our offense and you know, with our offense, it can do, and our defense, and our special teams, we have the flexibility in our scheme to do whatever we need to do to win that game that week when we prepare for it. And I think that, you know, that sometimes, you know, the narrative about Alex, okay? You know, one thing about being old, I do have experience, and I've seen quarterbacks take over an offense and run with the offense. And I think that's what's going to happen with this guy. I love the kid. So you know, I'm not evaluating anything or anything else offensively because I've got my hands full where we're at. But I think that there shouldn't be a narrative put on. There shouldn't be any limitations put on it because you know, it's one of those things. Same thing I was talking about with the defense. Every day you just try to get better, and you build it as you go. And what happens is there's overreactions when you have a different schedule than what we've had here in the past, you know, the past few years, right? And you stub your toe, which is Texas, right? But there's an overreaction to it. Bottom line is just come in every week and be 1-0. So whatever it takes.
I turned my mic off. There we go. Now it's back on. I had to wait. Nonetheless, I mean, you could hear the confidence. Grant Newsome kind of echoed him in some of the things that he had to say about the what they're able to do. This idea that like they can't throw. He's like, listen, we can throw. Wink Martindale's like, we can throw. Now we need to see it in a game, obviously. But you know, it's good to know that he has this, you know, the old codgers support. Best way I can put it. I love Wink. I hope you, if you are watching this, just know that I love you. But he's got his support in full, he's got his back. And I think that is certainly within the realm of possibility for Alex Orji and the offense, right? I want to remind you, because there's a lot of people out there that act like, okay, he can't, it will never change. It will just be what it is. We've seen offenses struggle, and you're like, you sit there and look early on and say that they're not going to be able to get it going. And then before long, you're like, okay, this guy is the real deal. I mean, this time last year, no one was talking about Jalen Milroe as being one of the best quarterbacks in the country. It was kind of like, what is Alabama going to do, because they don't have a quarterback, right? They had benched Jalen Milroe in week 3. And even going into the SEC championship game, it was like, okay. I mean, he just had an incredible play to beat Auburn, but like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden the narrative changes. It just takes stringing a couple of those along. This is a new offense with him. And one of the things I thought was interesting that Grant Newsome said is, like, we can do a lot of things that you don't see, a lot of scheme things. He said we do kind of a little bit of everything schematically. You just might not see it because we don't need it, but we install it just in case. So we'll see as far as like the read option, RPOs, and all of that stuff, if that starts becoming something that works. I think all it's going to take kind of is getting into a game like this exact one, or even Washington, and they hit something that works. And if once they find something that another team struggles to stop, then you kind of just keep on exploiting that. It's the same thing that happens with the run game, right? That's kind of what happened with Michigan in the run game. It's not like Michigan didn't try to run the football ad nauseum into loaded boxes in the early part of the Jim Harbaugh era. It just wasn't nearly as dynamic. And you started to see that they were going back to kind of that old pro style look in 2020. Didn't have the quarterbacks in offensive line to run it at that time, but those guys got better and they figured things out in game. And, you saw the Washington game. A lot of you had the same reaction, I'm sure, to the Washington game as you did USC this last week, and sat there and melted down. A couple weeks later against Rutgers, same kind of deal, continued to melt down. And then suddenly they were able to pass the ball against a really good Wisconsin team that really didn't like to give up anything on the ground or through the air. Right? That was like an absolutely incredible Wisconsin defense, and they found a way to make it work, and they moved the ball in ways that they just kind of hadn't up until that point, and hadn't for like more than a calendar year. So you just kind of have to wait on it and see like what they kind of are able to figure out. Because you did waste 3 games, now you get to begin the tinkering process to figure out what you got in Alex Orji. And I'm not saying it's going to work. No one knows that for sure. But I think this gives Michigan the best chance. And I think with the schedule that's forthcoming, none of these teams are exactly cupcakes. Minnesota is probably one of the 2 easiest teams remaining on the schedule. That doesn't say a lot. It's still the Big Ten team. They can beat you any given week. And Northwestern being the other one. But, it's theoretically still Illinois shouldn't compare to Michigan. Indiana shouldn't compare to Michigan, but you have to prove that on the field, regardless of anything, because coaching matters and talent, it kind of varies sometimes from team to team. All right, let's get into the final thing that I want to talk about, which is kind of like this weird, I talked about Michigan's fans' reaction. Let's talk about this weird USC fan reaction. We got to get into that at least a little bit this week. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're going to run a little short today just because I did not manage my time effectively today. And I've got church tonight, but I also have this, by the time you see this, it'll be long over. You can watch the replay Got my weekly Wednesday Bleacher Report live. We do it 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. Doing it throughout this month. We're doing it next month. We're doing it all the way through the season, I think. But nonetheless, it's been weird seeing some of the USC fan reactions because it's fans. I mean, even you got Lincoln Riley kind of saying like, "Oh, we were baller on 43 of our 47 runs Michigan had." Okay, like. That's not always inaccurate, right? Like the Ohio State, 5 plays. The same could be said for Michigan in 2018, right? Like it doesn't feel like it, but the same thing could be said. Explosive plays are part of football. You can't stop the explosive plays. I mean, that's teams that are explosive tend to do pretty well. Michigan 2021, most explosive team in the country. Did not seem like it when I found out that stat going to the Big Ten championship game. And then you see the Big Ten championship game against an Iowa team that has a stodgy defense, and they still managed a bunch of explosive plays. But the USC fan, because they were very, very confident, right? Like it was kind of that we won this game, we just have to show up. I understand because USC had 2 really good games. They beat LSU, who was expected to be a lot better because LSU under Brian Kelly is like Notre Dame under Brian Kelly. You get a lot of credit for beating them, and it doesn't necessarily work out. I mean, poor Florida State last year, going undefeated after that and not making the playoff. But it's been kind of funny to see just like all of the tweets that come up on my Twitter for you. I saw a lot of those USC fans, and they were just kind of like, well, come get your beating, Michigan. And then when they don't get it, it's they held on every single play. It's terrible. It's the worst thing that's ever happened. And, there was some bad play officiating in this game, but it went both ways. I mean, there absolutely were calls that should have gone USC's way. The delay of game is one of them. The missed face mask, which I caught in real time. Josiah Stewart's first sack. But there were I can't remember exactly what there was another face mask or 2 that I saw that USC should have gotten that they didn't get called for. Late hit that they didn't get called for. There was the hands to the face on the final offensive play for Michigan. They'd like to call the Zach Marshall thing a holding call. That's just part of the game. And if they're missing it on both sides, right, then it's kind of like, what are we doing here? This isn't like a one-sided thing. Now, if you're a Michigan fan, you've seen a lot of one-sided officiating. 2016 Ohio State had some just egregious calls. And sometimes you're going to be in the positive, sometimes you're gonna be in the negative, but the whining about it, it's like they're acting a lot like they really won the game. They got pushed around in the first half. I know you played better in the second half, USC. That's congratulations. You did part of what you were supposed to do, but you got pushed around. You got absolutely mauled up front, and then you made halftime adjustments and things looked a lot better, but let's not act, if you're a USC fan, like the first half didn't happen. Because springing those runs wasn't an accident. It wasn't like Michigan was running for 1 yard a carry and then all of a sudden the offensive line got lucky and they opened up a hole. And it's not like, okay, new for you with Kalel Mullings. You did the same thing last week, but new for you. Okay, new for him a little bit too. The Donovan Edwards touchdown, we've seen that time and time again. Happened against their former Pac-12 counterpart in Washington in the national championship game. These are things that happen. It's part of the game. If you're going to be in the Big Ten, you're going to lose some games against some of the bigger teams. Michigan's, the Penn States, the Ohio States. Like that, you're just going to lose. You're going to lose Iowa every now and again. Congratulations. You're going to get Iowa'd. So... I had to at least give them a little bit of a mention after everything, and it's been entertaining to say the least. Certainly some elements of it have been annoying. I know a lot of you have been interacting with Barry Alexander's dad. Listen, let him cope. Let his son plays on the team, let him cope. Let him go out there and say Bear had a better recruiting ranking than Mason Graham and see how that works out for him. It's just delusion. They've got a 1 in the loss column. There's nothing that they can do about that now. Michigan's got the win. No one really thought at halftime that USC was anywhere close to contending with them. If you looked on social media, which I did during halftime, and it was like a bunch of people being like, holy crap, Michigan. You know? It wasn't because of missed play calls and stuff like that, missed refereeing and what have you. It was because Michigan played its style of bully ball and it executed it, and it did so in a way that USC clearly was not ready for. Maybe someday they will be. It's kind of the same thing. I think they had the same expectations that Ohio State and fans and coaches and all of that expected going into the 2021 version of the game, and that's why they're reacting that way. You know, it's I don't want to say arrogance. It's entitlement, what it is. So anyway, we're going to be back on Thursday. We'll be, I don't know if we're going to do a mailbag or not. Maybe I'll put out a call. We'll see. If I do, then expect it. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do a mailbag, and then we'll do a preview with Trente, hopefully the next day. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.